I'm Edie, and this is my Volvo 480. So, you've seen a 480 and you want one. So this is a bit of a buyer's guide, hopefully. It's not aimed at people who buy and sell cars all the time, it's aimed at people who aren't familiar with a 480, and this hopefully will be a good look around so you can see what things should look like. Head over heart when you go and look at a car. Unless you've got a bottomless pot of gold, don't buy unseen. There could be all sorts going on under that polish. We've seen numerous 480s in recent years that look amazing online, and then when the buyer finds the forum and joins the forum, they tell us all the things that are wrong with the vehicle. So definitely go and see it. There are people from the forum dotted about the UK who will be more than happy to either go and have a look at the car for you or with you, to give you an honest opinion. We are in an age now where a lot of people are referring to how many left to try and sell rarer cars. Try and look past all of that. There's a high probability they are completely clueless about the 480, and you really do need to know this car to know what you're looking for. Educate yourself, ask forum members, don't buy blind. Automotive clubs, obviously, if it's an enthusiast owned car, then they've very likely been really well looked after, whatever mileage they are, so they're really good cars to look at. In my experience, there's always going to be problems. I paid a lot of money for this car and I've put a lot of money into it since I've had it. It was off the road for about 10 years, recommissioned, then it came to me, and even after all the work, thousands of pounds worth of work that was done, it still cost me a lot. So these cars have to move. They're not a car that wants to sit months on end. You will get a lot of problems then. So whatever you take on, be prepared. Down the line, things are going to pop up, especially if they've been off the road for a while. Don't rely on eBay. Obviously, there's other sites like, I think eBay would be the last place I'd go to sell my car. Car and Classic is a really good site, and also, again, join the forum. We'll talk a bit about that later, about cars that are for sale on the forum. The Volvo Owners Club also have a forum, and a handful pop up on there every year, and again, they're enthusiast owned, they've been looked after, they've been cared for, they've been maintained. National car auctions as well often throw a few in a year. Again, not the easiest way to buy one, but they are out there. At present, there is a rescue system in place on the Volvo 480 forum where members have pulled together and we're rescuing 480s. One member is doing all the mechanical work, and then they've got through their MOTs, they're given a good strip down, a good clean, everything changed and sorted, getting them fresh, up to date, bringing them into 2021, MOT'd, and then sold on to interested buyers. that buyer then continues the work cosmetically to get the car up to standard. Again, if it's a car that's been off the road a while, things are going to pop up. Age-wise, there were two kind of versions of the 480 pre-facelift and after facelift, so it was about 87 to 91, then 91 to 95. I have seen a car that was registered in 96, obviously just a leftover celebration, I think it was. With the facelift, there's a slight difference just in a few bits on the car. The wing mirrors are smaller, the indicators are clear. There are a number of different interiors. The earlier ones had a grey cloth interior with a red or blue piping, and then that went on to sort of the grey cloth interior with the coloured centre part. Then you've got the half leather, full leather. The Celebration has full leather, and it's got its door cards are kind of gathered, so it looks like it's sort of aged and warped, but they're supposed to be like that. And then the GT has got the rarest interior, which is crazy printed leather. I won't go into the technicalities of the car. Renault, Porsche and Lotus were involved in the design. The design is it started a long time before the car was produced. It's quite a good history of it. There's also a book that's just been written. This is available personally from the person who wrote it. So you have to probably join the forum and somebody can give you his email address, and it's the history of the Volvo coupes, not just the 480. Basically what you're going to get is a 1.7 or a 2 litre or a 1.7 turbo. That's the only engines that were ever used. There's never a 2 litre turbo. The cars were produced in Born in the Netherlands, and there were 76,000-ish made, and of those 76,000 the UK got around 22,000. It's the first front-wheel drive Volvo with a transverse engine, and it was first unveiled at the 1986 Geneva Motor Show. Looked upon as the predecessor for the C30, and I've got one of those too because I'm greedy and they match. The 480's predecessor was the 1800 ES, which ended production in the early 1970s, I believe. You can see line them all up, you can see the resemblance of the glass hatch and the shape on all of them. The odd design and appearance, odd for Volvo of course, was supposed to be a new era of a sporty hatch, which of course was practical. It had a lot of space still in the back. The plan originally was to release the 480 onto the US market as well, but the exchange rate at the time was really terrible and that never happened. But that explains the design of the front with the impact bumpers and the level of the headlights and things like that. A few have been imported to the US. I'd probably say less than 10, maybe even less than 5. So there are a few over there. The Cabriolet as well never made it to production. There is a prototype in the Volvo Museum. And I think a couple of people in Europe have converted ordinary 480s into cabriolets. So finally for sale in 1987, the first car was the ES, the 1.7 ES, and then there was a 1.7 turbo. Later on there was the 2 litre ES. Then we had the limited edition, which is green and silver. There's also a Paris Blue limited edition with a green stripe through the bumpers. The GT, and then the final 480 that were limited to 480 were called the Celebration, and they were a 2 litre. There's also the base model, which is the 480S. This came with analogue fuel gauges, no fog lights, no sunroof, no alloys. You could add them as extras, but obviously then you might as well have bought an ES. The turbo is probably the most desirable model, especially manual turbo, despite it not being the rarest. The earlier turbo, which is this one, was 120 horsepower, that's 87 to 91-ish, and 91 to 95 they were 122 horsepower, all important. Records aren't great at the DVLA. I don't think I've had a 2 litre ES that was actually listed as a GT, so you can never be certain. So all in all, there were around 76,000 480s produced in Born, and the UK got about 22,000 of those. Of those 22,000, what we've got left now are around, in reality, there are supposedly about 840 in existence. 131 of those are Celebrations, 158 turbos of all the different varieties. Of course, out of that 840, we don't know what state they're in. We don't know if they are just a pile of parts. They're just literally what's left registered. On the road, there are probably about 190 at the moment. Saying that, where are they all? We actually run registers for the Celebration and the Turbo, so if you've got a Celebration and a Turbo and we don't know about it, please register on the forum and let us know. There is a thread called The Secret Life of Volvo 480 Owner, so you can tell your story, and obviously it's great for you to refer to in the past. If you can't remember what you've done, you can always go back and see if you've done it. So join and tell us your story. In terms of how long they'll last, I know personally of a couple of 480s that are well over 200,000 miles because they've been maintained and looked after. So, you don't have to not use it. It can be your daily driver. I had 3 before this one and they were all daily drivers, and they keep up fine with the traffic. Depending on what life it's had, you may get rattles, you may not, in terms of inside with the plastic. Mine's pretty good. I would absolutely say keep it under cover, keep it in a garage if you can. It really, really, really makes a difference. Mine lives in a Carcoon and it does make a difference. I try and use mine quite regularly from early spring to late autumn, and then over the winter I'll get it out every 4 weeks and roll it about. I might tax it and take it out depending on what I want to do, but I do try and keep it off the road when it is too wet. Obviously, again, if you're not really used to buying and selling cars, the most basic thing you can do is check online for the MOT history, and if anything comes up, if there's been corrosion there, severe corrosion, the seatbelt anchors and things like that, maybe steer clear. Have a look at it. Has it been done? You might find somebody has done it, someone's cared for it, it might make a difference, but usually it hasn't. The electrics and water ingress are always going to get mechanics breathing in through their teeth. You really have to know the 480 to know that it's absolutely fixable. As long as the entire floor isn't rusted, you're fine. It is fixable. You can clean it up, dry it out, fix where that's coming in, and you're fine. Any car that's around 30 years old is going to be an intermittent headache, so bear that in mind before you buy a 480. Have you got a fat wallet, and have you got a lot of patience? So let's move around now, have a look around the car. What are the common faults? What are the common issues? Where are they? What do they look like? So I've done this on the hottest day of the year, so the sun's going to be in our way a bit, but this is your electrics for the rear hatch. This is common for them to fray and damage, and also for them to let water in, so that's a place for you to check. Obviously the boot seal as well. Try and make sure that this is in good condition if you're looking at one of these cars. So in the boot you should either have a boot cover or like a roller boot cover. The roller ones are a little bit more rare. Underneath there you've got the carpet. Underneath the carpet there's foam, and this foam loves to hold water if it gets a little bit wet. So always if you get any water ingress, take this mat out and take it into the house, let it dry. Under here you've got your jack, so there's a little shallow bay in there, and then obviously the spare wheel. Under the spare wheel there is a drain. Make sure the drain's empty, and that is a common place where rust will build up if the water can't drain out. Another common place for water to check for wet is if it's got mats, check under the mats, check the rear footwell, and also under here, under the seats, it kind of dishes. So under there sometimes can hold water as well. Same thing in the engine bay, you've got a seal around here. This is quite important, so make sure that's in place. And there's a couple of little bits just behind either light as well. Due to sound distortion, we've now moved to a new area to retake all the videos. So the sunroof obviously is a possible point of leakage, but it's unlikely, but worth checking. We've recently discovered that it looks like only the sides of the windscreen frame are painted, so that does leave the top and the bottom vulnerable to rust. Very much worth checking. And these areas here, right on the corners, are really common places for rust to start, and for anything like a tiny hole to a huge hole to grow there. So that is very much worth checking as well. Rear lights. Don't seal these. A lot of people sealed them thinking that's a great job done, I won't get water in there. But then what if you need to take them out? Then obviously more likely to break the lenses. So if they're not sealed, don't seal them. Just keep the car out of the rain as much as possible. The French Club have made a development where they've now reproduced all of these lenses, so both the lights and the centre lens there. They also reproduce the box behind the centre lens. If you need all 3 lenses, I think you're looking something like around €500, which you can buy. You have to, they produce them in batches, so you put your name down for them. You have to supply your V5 and your driving licence to prove that you're a 480 owner, and then they'll send them to you with the next batch. Obviously, again, these lights haven't been refurbished. You can see they're a little bit dull. They're not too bad, they're not cracked or anything like that, but this is a spare one that I've refurbished here, and you can really see the difference. Such a simple thing. I used 3 different grades of wet and dry, up to about 1500 different directions, and then just use this U-POL clear coat, UV resistant of course. That was just from Halfords. I think that was about £16, so really worth doing if you can. This will be the best piece of 480 information you're going to get. So down here there are a couple of rubber drains. They just squeeze, they'll just pull out of the hole. There's also there's one down there as well. Sorry, a couple as in one each side. These are, more often than not, they're completely blocked full of gunge. That causes the water to just build up completely in this scuttle area. It'll ruin the electrics and it goes over into the car. So always check those drains and keep them clean. So this car being the pre-facelift, we've got the orange indicators. This is all one unit. This is your long range light, and your fog lights are under here. Again, these DRL lenses are now being reproduced by somebody. Join the forum and we can put you in contact with them. They were about €70 a pair, but obviously it really does tidy them up because the heat of the bulbs really takes its toll. The unit as well, the plastic behind, if you run your pop-ups all the time, that takes the bulb in here down from 21 watts to 4 watts. So obviously it's putting out a lot less heat and a lot less chance of it distorting the unit behind. So of course it goes without saying, if it's not had a cam belt and water pump and you can't find any history of it, definitely get that done. Another few things to replace just automatically would be distributor cap, rotor arm, leads, spark plugs, which are NGK, where have I got it? ZGR5B. You can still get, and again of course all the fluids, you can still get Volvo oil filters for this car. Mine's automatic. The ATF I use is a Castrol Dexron 2. I do use Castrol oil as well. I try and use the best things that are available to it, and I also only use V-Power. Be very aware, of course, that E10 fuel is coming in. The 480 has a couple of little 80s perks in it, so when you're coming up to the car, this light will be on so you can see where the keyhole is. Also, if you activate your main beam when you're parked up, everything's turned off, your keys are out, it will leave the long range lights on for about 30 seconds, a minute. I can't remember without reading it. I think now that's called Home Safe or Follow Me Home lights. Down here, if you didn't want to use just your headlights as your main beam, you can turn on the long range lights. So when you activate your main beam, it gives a really much better distance of lighting. Unfortunately, we're in daylight now compared to last night, but we've got the fog lights on there. These are the long range lights, so when you switch that button on in the car, that will be your main beam. The DRLs are dimmed, and obviously the pop-ups. It is worth noting as well, if you do put cheap LEDs in your DRLs, it does play up with the other lights. They also don't seem to dim when the pop-ups are on as well, so I think there are other options out there, but I just leave mine to the original. Okay, the info centre. So when you turn on the ignition, you'll have the ABS light, the warning light. The ABS light and the warning light will go out. Obviously you've got your handbrake on. When you start the car, these will go off, or hopefully. The bulb out light will go off the first time you brake. The only one that will stay on is this green bulb one. If anything else is on, it shouldn't be. unless you've got an issue, of course. So it's a little bit brighter now than last night, but I will try and talk you through the info centre here. So this is your instantaneous fuel consumption, which obviously while we're stood still is nothing. Your average fuel consumption, average speed, range that you've got left in the tank, oil temperature, engine temperature, and the exterior temperature. And these are all run by this little thing here. You can change the units, excuse me, you can change the units here, so if you want them in Fahrenheit, basically, I know in my car I've only got the option of if it's in Fahrenheit, it's in miles, if it's in Celsius, it's in kilometres. Some other cars, I don't know if you can change that, and you just pop a little pin in there to change the unit. Motors and struts are available for the pop-ups if you have got any problems. Sometimes it is just electrical, though it might not be anything to do with the actual motor themselves. The struts will be relatively cheap. The motors, if you can get a second-hand one, obviously you might be lucky too. I believe they're shared with Ferrari. If you want a new one, I don't know how expensive they are. To the rear arches, this is number one what you're going to be looking for. They're really vulnerable. Again, keep your car out of the weather as much as you possibly can. It really does make a difference. When you go and look at a car, put your hands up behind there, make sure nothing's bubbling, make sure nothing's crumbling. There could be some bubbling just on the outside that might need taking care of. You can now buy replacement arch sections from Scandix. I think they're around £130 a piece, I think, and flat postage of €60 now we're out of the EU. I have been told that they don't quite fit and they still might need a little bit of tweaking, but obviously the option's there if you need it. I'll pop a link down below. Another really important place to check is the front of the arch here and underneath. Have a really good look under there, touch it all, poke in there, make sure you've got nothing filling it in and nothing crumbling in there. This is another common area where you get rust under this weather strip. You'll be really hard pushed to find one that hasn't got that. So another area where you can't see is the rear bumper bar. There's a huge sponge in there holding water for 25-30 years, so that's prone to rust as well. It also comes around the side, and there are some vents in here which may be one of the areas where water actually gets in under the boot mat. Again, there's not much you can do about it. You can remove the sponges if you want. I assume they're there for impact, but I know a lot of people remove them. And again, inside, just keep your car out of the weather as much as you can. Check your plastics on the interior of the car. Check that these are all in place. If you've got the seatbelt arms in place, that's excellent. That's good to have them still existing. You've got all these knobs here. You've got the seat back height, the door pockets as well. If you've got door pockets intact, that's excellent. Something that is hugely common is the broken dash corner. The plastic is so gathered under there that over time it pushes it out. Obviously the heat and the light, these get quite brittle. You can pop, when you take this off, you can pop a couple of sponges under there just to help with the rattling as well. If you ever do need to take your dash out, which is highly likely, I'll put a link to a how-to on the forum for that if you're not sure how to do that. Of course, things like the Speedo might not be working. 9 times out of 10, you just need new cogs. Again, these are available. If you're into 3D printing, you can do that, but someone does supply those if you need them. And usually the info centre will be intermittent, it might be off. You'd be very lucky if you get one that actually works 100% of the time. Over time, of course, the soldered joints are dry, they're all rattling, just age, they just need a bit of TLC, they probably need some new bulbs replacing, all things like that. It's all fixable, it's all available. This is the older style steering wheel. The newer one is quite a large box in the centre which holds an airbag. Being one of the older cars, this doesn't have it, but some of the new cars come with aircon, CD player, and this is a digital clock that's sort of retrofitted. This did come with an ordinary analog clock. The very early ones came with a digital clock. Another 480 secret: take the heater knobs off. They are not supposed to be the colour that they are on the car that you pick up. They are thick grease, so they just pop off and scrape at them and you'll be surprised what comes off them. The car is pretty easy to strip out and clean, so if you have got any rust on the carpet or you have had wet carpets, it is quite easy to get all the seats out, all of the carpets out. And while you're there, obviously, you could do some soundproofing. I'll put a link below to the stuff that I've used. So I believe all the Celebs, GTs and Celebrations have this front splitter here. Very vulnerable where it is, of course, and they're quite brittle as well. If you need a new one of those, I'll pop a link below. As I said, check the seat releases, make sure that they all work. And this is the fuel and boot release as well, backwards and forwards. Just check that's there, check that the outside's there as well. Window regulators are another thing that could go. It's much more expensive for the driver's one than it is for the passenger one, I guess, because they're rarer, they're more in need. So you're probably looking to pay around £50 to £100 for one of those. Suspension and brakes. You're highly likely to want to or need to replace some parts here. Everything's still available. I think the only thing that I had trouble with was rear control arms, so I had those just refurbished. But you can get everything. You can get calipers, wheel hubs, brake discs, brake pads, shock absorbers. You might be able to get some original shock absorbers, but it'd take a while to gather them. I've used Brembo discs and pads. I can give you a link to that as well because I found it really hard to get them in this country. And also I got a lot of parts from Polar Parts before obviously we left the EU. I have messaged them since because they were so easy to buy from and so quick to deliver. I have messaged them since and they said they are going to be reinstating UK delivery. It will just be a matter of time. I'll pop a link to Polar Parts there for you too. There are also parts from other cars that will fit this car, not necessarily the 440 and the 460. You'll probably find a lot of parts from there don't actually fit. There's such things as like the Jaguar accumulator, and I've had a Saab pressure sensor. So join the forum again and somebody will be able to point you in the right direction if there's something you need you can't find. So there you go. That's the Volvo 480. I can't stress enough how much valuable information has already been shared on the forum. So if you're looking for answers of any kind, go on there, do a search, and if there isn't an answer, somebody will be really willing to help you. I hope that this video has been useful to anybody looking to buy a 480 and shown you some of the things to look for.